Hello, and welcome to me, the laziest writer, delivering part 2 of my video on the next Mass Effect game. Now, of course, there is a part 1, but it's not essential if you have a knowledge of the franchise, or at least the information that we have so far concerning the upcoming sequel. However, if you're not caught up, it might be beneficial to watch part 1, as a lot of this may not make sense without a knowledge of the series and what's going on. I also want to say a huge thanks to everyone who helped me out with this video in the various places that I asked what you wanted to see, as the response was way larger than I'd initially anticipated, and every response really opened my eyes up to a new point of view regarding the upcoming game. On top of that, I'd like to offer a disclaimer, as I don't want to pretend that I have any solid understanding of what the future of the series holds. This video is simply based upon my interactions with other Mass Effect fans and how their desires reflect the information that we have so far. And last but not least, those of you who haven't already left should stick around until the end of the video if you want to see a picture of a hedgehog wearing a pirate hat, which you could probably just Google or skip ahead to the end in order to see, but I'm going to bribe you with it anyway. And without further ado, let's get into what fans want from Mass Effect 5. Jumping right in, many fans are eager to see another game full of the quality writing, world building, and in-depth character work that the series is known for. This is pretty self-explanatory, of course, but it's worth noting that BioWare flexed and defined what are often considered their best traits when producing the original trilogy in particular, and any similar levels of success here would be a serious return to form for the studio. But the more specific hopes are a bit of a nebulous mess of chaotic fury, so I've had to divide them into categories that will hopefully help us to navigate the stars from here on out. So, first and foremost, let's jump into behind the scenes. One popular request is for the original trilogy cast to return where possible. This seems highly likely for me, given that we know Liara is involved, and I don't see BioWare missing the chance to show what happened to all of our favourite characters, even if only through cameos. If Grunt is returning, or if there are dual timelines, we could see any number of the original trilogy cast back for more. Also, voice acting obviously allows for people to return in different roles, such as if any Vorcha has survived, in which case male Shepard voice actor Mark Meer might be back to lend his talents to the species. Either way, many would love to see the return of the quality voice acting of such professionals as Jennifer Hale and Courtney Taylor, and I have to agree that it lends a legitimacy and level of quality that would seriously benefit the game. And when you add in the fact that the Citadel DLC proved that BioWare know how to do fan service, it almost seems more likely than not that we will get to see some of the previous game's excellent cast returning in Mass Effect 5. There have also been some calls for the return of figures involved in developing the original games, and on that front it's mostly good news, based upon the return of several key personnel and Mike Gamble's hint that there are more that we don't yet know about. Similarly, calls for a movement away from the Frostbite engine of Mass Effect Andromeda appear to have been answered, as it looks like the series will be returning to the Unreal Engine, as I detailed in part 1. And now moving on to category number 2, the story. First things first, some fans would like a bit of clarity on Shepard's ending and their friends and love interests. Those who chose the Destroy ending have created a world in which Shepard might survive, and thus might have a serious interest in seeing what their character went on to do in the rest of their life. As there are some signs suggesting that the Destroy ending will be the canon ending for the original trilogy, the trailer and what we know so far can be taken as good news for those fans who would love to see, whether as lore, cameo, or a key part of the story, some return on the part of Commander Shepard. There's also still a lot of love for the sci-fi horror vibe that has cropped up in certain areas throughout the games, with some stating that they're really hoping for that area to shine through. Some of Mass Effect's most memorable moments, such as Shepard's death or the assault of the Banshees in Mass Effect 3, are downright terrifying, and a reinvigoration of those qualities would seemingly please a lot of fans. A couple of people are looking for a smaller story overall, which I can definitely appreciate. We've already faced 2 galactic level threats, and what we've seen so far is perhaps hinting more heavily at a concept of reconstruction and more personal, intimate stories than any of the major plot points in the series thus far. On this note, one fan suggested that it would be nice to see something like a citizen putting together a crew for transport jobs and running into trouble with a crime syndicate or another similar faction. Considering Mass Effect's well-established criminal underworld and the fact that something like this could accommodate more readily for the choices of the original trilogy, I could definitely see the benefits of something along those lines. Another fan suggested that the journey to piece together what remains of Shepard could facilitate an interesting and much more relaxed atmosphere. Similarly, I have seen some argue that the new game should focus on rebuilding the galaxy, or even just one solar system, after the events of the Reaper War, as the galactic community struggles to come together after such a destructive conflict. This would involve navigating the franchise's complex political background, which we did a little of in both 3 and Andromeda, and which would be necessary in order to ensure that the inevitable social restructuring of a much-changed society is as smooth and beneficial as possible. A key part of what people want to see is the introduction of new races and classes. The first 2 games in the series did a great job of introducing us to a whole galaxy full of alien worlds, various species, and an array of cultures, whilst the 3rd and 4th allowed us through their multiplayer modes to experience playing as a vast range of alien races and combat roles. However, many fans still yearn for the option to play a single-player storyline as themselves within the rich lore, culture, and combat abilities of an inhuman character in something other than the simple waves of enemies approach taken by the multiplayer. Having so many options would provide a highly customizable experience that could enhance the role-playing aspect of the game, whilst also expanding upon the series' pre-existing replayability. If they could provide an authentic feel true to our chosen species, we might finally be able to explore the worlds of Mass Effect through the eyes of someone who doesn't originate from Earth. This would of course provide difficulty with the dialogue, both in its recording and in the variety of options that would have to arise, but perhaps BioWare could utilise something like the system in Cyberpunk 2077. Hear me out here. That game contains a system in which your backstory occasionally offers unique dialogue options or insights, leaving the rest of the options the same so that the player can enforce their own role-playing ideals, while simultaneously lending importance to their chosen backstory through having their playthrough influenced by the decisions that they made regarding their character's origins. If something like that were implemented, and implemented well, it could solve a lot of the problems that a possible multi-species player character could provide, but that's a big if. Additionally, Andromeda only really introduced 3 species, only 2 of which had any kind of voice or major exploration of their history or culture, so even if we don't get to play as them, some fans would still like to see the introduction of a new species or 2 to fully explore as a living and thriving community, or perhaps even as the latest threat. And that point definitely pertains to category number 3, which is gameplay and customization. One possible element that fans are looking forward to is the potential to modify our ship, weapons, and armour. Seeing as Mass Effect Andromeda's Nomad was customizable, and we've had varying degrees of bespoke outfits throughout the games thus far, it seems that this will be at least partially fulfilled. I also found it interesting for the way in which it indicates a direction that people would like to see the game take regarding the series' balance of its action and RPG elements. This has swung back and forth throughout the franchise like a genre-defining seesaw, so I find it intriguing to consider which approach Mass Effect 5 will take. Yet another fan mentioned their wish that the game would introduce some of the abilities from BioWare's 2019 title Anthem, which seeks to offer more varied gameplay through the power of inhuman abilities such as the sheer brute force of the tank-class Colossus, or of course the power of flight, which would really have helped Shepard to avoid all those lengthy elevator rides, and to escape awkward social situations a little more elegantly than simply stating, "I should go." Another fan's desire for the return of Andromeda's jump jets perhaps seeks to provide some middle ground there. Similarly, there's interest in any expansion upon the concepts of biotic abilities, which to me have always felt like the most interesting element of this series' combat. Despite the relatively wide range of techniques, there's understandably an interest in providing more options for players in Mass Effect 5. I mean, look at this. Surely we're only scratching the surface here. There's endless potential, and I'm fully on board with the desire for something more to spice up the gameplay this time around. A couple of people highlighted that they'd love to see finisher moves introduced to the combat, such as those present in Dragon Age Origins, another BioWare game with much critical acclaim. These can add a bit of fun, and goals for players to set themselves within the combat, providing another level of variety and the opportunity to play the game however you desire. The next and final category is a big one, the Andromeda Dilemma. I've left it until last because this is perhaps the most controversial and debated of anything regarding the next Mass Effect game, and this is in a series with a lot of things that are highly controversial and vehemently debated. So what are we waiting for? Let's get into it. Some are interested in seeing a healthy mixture of the original trilogy and Andromeda, both story-wise and in terms of gameplay. We've seen hints that the 2 galaxies will both be included in the game, suggesting a possible continuation of both storylines. One fan even suggested that a conduit between 2 major locations, such as the Milky Way Citadel and Andromeda's Nexus, could provide a feasible link between the 2 galaxies that have been explored thus far. Furthermore, an extension of Ryder's story has been called for, as well as a seizing of the opportunity to right the wrongs of Andromeda's DLC Disaster, in which downloadable content was intended to complete or update several half-finished story threads and character arcs, but was ultimately cancelled after the game's poor reception. Therefore, a DLC commitment that was actually fulfilled would please a lot of fans, especially given the inarguable quality of some of the franchise's past downloadable content. More specifically, some highlighted the desire for BioWare to deliver that DLC that fans were promised so long ago. Getting to experience an in-game discovery of what happened to the Quarian arc is at the top of some people's lists, after the incomplete story of Andromeda left some with a sour taste. Furthermore, it was argued that, in order to prevent this, and to allow for a wider exploration of the Mass Effect universe, the upcoming entry's DLC should be used separately from the main story, as an opportunity to discover new characters, locations, and narratives. This could provide new perspectives within the vibrant and genuine world that the franchise offers, and would allow players to dive into the rich lore that has created such a believable setting for the franchise to occupy. Returning to the Andromeda question, other fans are not so hot on the idea that Andromeda's story will be included. Whilst the combat was one element of the spin-off that did receive a lot of acclaim, it was another entry in a strange pattern by which the gameplay is different in every Mass Effect game, and often pretty significantly. Inevitably, some preferred the systems of prior entries, and one called for a return to the somewhat less fluid, open and dynamic style of Mass Effect 3. In fact, the same fan stated that the only thing they wanted carried over from Andromeda was the skill system, so this is clearly still a hot topic amongst the fans, and perhaps one to which there is no particular answer. Another fan announced that Andromeda and other BioWare titles, such as Anthem, had caused them to lose all faith in the company's ability to produce a worthy successor to the Mass Effect trilogy. Said fan would rather they'd stop interfering and let sleeping dogs lie. Not sure they quite got the memo, but it's certainly true that not everyone in the Mass Effect community has faith in a team whose stock has been in decline for several years now, especially given the number of fans who would simply rather that Andromeda had never happened. Given the issues that I mentioned in the prior video concerning the potential need to canonize one ending, I can definitely empathise with those who would rather that the trilogy, as pretty much perfect as many view it to be, were left alone, perhaps once and for all. So clearly there's an enormous range of opinions on what exactly the next game should be, and even whether or not it's a mistake. This was just a relatively small sample size, and there was still so much to sort through and evaluate. I think, above all else, this just shows how much the series means to so many people, and the incredible variety of responses to the enormous range of experiences that the franchise can provide, as well as the implications that each event can have for our interpretations of the future of the story. On that note, I once again find myself at the conclusion that all we can really do at this point is wait and see what happens, and to those of you who stuck around this far, I offer a huge thanks, and this picture of a hedgehog wearing a pirate hat, because you deserve it. And with all that out of the way, I'll see you next time.